Matthew Elliott. Thank you for joining me on NRL Fans WA.
Always a pleasure, Jamie. Looking forward to having a good chat.
Thank you, mate. I was researching your career, mate. You've gone back. You started playing for St George 1989. You played 60 odd games for them.
Yep.
And then you retire in 92. We finished playing in 92, and then a few years off until you start coaching and you go over to England to coach as well. When you look back on like your playing days and then going into coaching, was there something that someone said to you or a bit of advice someone gave to you when you were younger that has stood out and helped you through those times?
Well, I had to retire. I was only 28 and I'd had multiple knee injuries. So the doctor at St George at that time gave me that advice. I wasn't really pleased to hear it, and I had no intention of coaching at all, Jamie. I was very lucky. I had a very good job in local government, but Brian Smith, as soon as I had to retire, invited me onto the coaching staff. So it was a little bit of a surprise. And at that time on the Dragons coaching staff, not only was Brian Smith, he was pretty cutting edge in his approach. There was a guy called Max Ninnis that all Dragons fans would know who Max was, and Rod Reddy, of course. And there wasn't one thing I could say that I learned, but to be exposed to so many wise people at the one time really helped me get going in coaching. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, cool. That's pretty awesome to hear. Yeah, like I said, doing a bit of research, mate. You went over to England to start your first instruction to coaching in that sense, getting your own team, all that sort of stuff. How was that transition going from, I guess, Australian rugby league over to the English, and trying to coach the English in a different style?
Well, I had a great experience over there, but again, a little bit like going into coaching, it wasn't something that was planned. Some people will remember this. Way back in the day, the Roosters and the Dragons agreed to merge, and Brian Smith took the job at Bradford, the head coaching job, and I was on the staff. And I remember it was in July 1995, and Smithy said, "You want to come with me? I'm going to coach you at Bradford." And I said, "Yep." And he said, "Well, you're going to have to go next week."
Yeah, right.
So I went over there and coached the last winter season. And Smithy obviously finished his duties in Australia, and that sort of got me propelled there. So Brian stayed a year and then got an opportunity at Parramatta, and I took over from Brian. But my time in the UK certainly taught me a lot about coaching. But, it gave my family an experience for 5 years of living overseas and living in different communities. And, a lot of my girls started their school over there, and we lived in a really cool little village. And, yeah, wasn't just a great rugby league experience. It was a great life experience for sure.
Oh, that's awesome. And that goes with with your girls for the rest of their lives, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. They've got friends over there as well, and they've had a couple of trips back. So it was a really really fun experience. It's not obviously weather-wise not the nicest place to live, but I can tell you the people over there in Yorkshire in particular, you won't meet too many funnier people on the planet than if you go and hang out there for a while. So my ribs were always a little bit sore from laughing that much.
Oh, that's so cool. While you're at Bradford, mate, you end up making the GF in 1999. Unfortunately, you lose to, I think it was St Helens.
Yeah.
How was that experience like coming into your being in your first job as a full-time coach and then going to the grand final?
Well, we won it the first year I coached, like the Super League competition. So that was an extraordinary experience. We went to we made 2 Challenge Cup finals as well. We won one of those, but losing a grand final was never easy. And it was one of those ones. It was a really close game. Some some decisions that I must admit, as a young coach, I didn't really agree with. And we had Leon Price, whose son's now playing at Newcastle. He went the distance, and they pulled that back, and so it was a really close game. St Helens were an extraordinary team, so it was just going to having big experiences like that in the UK. Their fans, 20,000 of their fans will make the same amount of noise as 150 of ours. So when you're in a stadium with 110,000 people, and they're just going nuts and singing songs, it's that whole experience is extraordinary, and something I'll never forget, that's for sure.
Yeah, I bet. And you can see that that the crowd difference, in the, either the cricket or the soccer or all that sort of stuff, the crowds that they have over there, like you mentioned, 20,000 is compared to 150,000 in Australia. Yeah, they come up with songs for their teams and their players and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it would have been amazing to be a part of.
Yeah, we sort of developed a really good culture around that at Bradford. I'm sad to see where they are these days, but we averaged the highest amount of home game crowds, and we created a real experience. Well, the club did created a really, really extraordinary experience, just not on the field. We won a lot of games during that period, but we also off the field for our fans. So it hurts a bit to see them not have a team in the Super League, but hopefully in the near future that turns around.
Yeah, absolutely. You return back to Australia to go down to Canberra. Go from one cold place to another cold place. You're doing pretty well down there. And then you move back up towards Sydney and go to Penrith. How was going from England back to Australia? And I guess for me, it's quite interesting to hear the different people that go from Australia to England or England to Australia, and the different styles of play that the two countries have.
Yeah, there were different styles. If someone ever asked me, and I was really pressed on it, what was your favourite coaching period? At the time in Canberra was extraordinary. We didn't have the best rosters, but it was a really, the leadership in the club, I really enjoyed. They were very honest, and if there weren't resources available, they just said, look, we can't do that. I had a really good playing roster, not as far as talent goes, but as far as people go. So we probably overachieved nearly every year, making the semis, I think 5 out of 6 of the years that I was there. And it was a fun place to be. I've got nothing but, great reflections on that period there for sure.
Yeah. And I was reading up, when you went to Penrith, you copped heaps of criticism while you were at Penrith as well. How did you take that personally, like copping that criticism? I know it's a bit of a coach's job to cop the criticism, but we all see in the media, journalists defend the coaches a lot. Being the players on the field that are doing the job. But how did you personally take that criticism?
When I reflect back on it, I was probably a little bit, oblivious to it. To be honest with you, Jamie, I knew that we were heading in the right direction. There were some different challenges at the club at that time. Like there's such an amazing club at the moment, and I had no doubt that potential was there. But at the time, the club was in massive debt. Something that I wasn't aware of prior to going there. And there was also a transition. They'd just won a grand final just prior to me going there, and there had to be a transition of a lot of really good players out of the club because they kind of weren't going to get the club to where they. So I was really open and honest about it. So internally, those conversations about we're going to have to go backwards before we go forwards were there, and I felt like we did go forwards. Like in 2010, we got to, we came second in the regular season, and we had fortunate injuries and a quick exit out of the semis, but I think I really feel that we're on the right pathway. But in 2011, those differences of opinion sort of came to the head, and we both agreed at the beginning of that season that'd be my last one there. So,
Yeah.
but I'm so happy to see that the area and the club doing so well now.
Yeah, and it's because it's such a rich area with talent, isn't it? Such a big pool of players to pick from, and it's like I said, it's great to see that the junior basis is doing so well and coming through to the club.
A lot of good people in that area. A lot of good people involved in rugby league in that area, and it doesn't come without its challenges because it's probably a low socio-economic area, and that comes with certain struggles in communities. But I was astonished at that level of how amazing the commitment was in the community and to make those young players better.
Yeah, absolutely. You end up going over to the Warriors. In between going to the Warriors, though, you have a year was under Brian Smith again at the Roosters as an assistant.
Yep.
And then you go over to the Warriors. Well, with the Warriors, they sort of haven't had any really success in the sense of a grand final win. But yeah, for a while there, they were competing. They had some pretty big names coming out of New Zealand. How was it coaching those guys at that time?
Again, an extraordinary place to live. And I can look back at my time at Penrith and say, look, I don't think that the club was aligned to my thinking. When I go to New Zealand, I saw all that potential, but I reflect back now, and I may have been in denial when a tough decision was made to let go. But I certainly didn't coach at my best over there because I wasn't enough focused on the team. I was more focused on building the organisation. And when you're a head coach, and your key job is to build relationships with your players, and your key focus is to put all your energy into them. And I got a little in front of myself there. There's no doubt about that, and diluted my focus with the players. And all young people like your attention, right? And that's where you got to put your attention. So yeah, while my intention was all right and wanted to do that, I just I needed to get out of other people's way and just coach, and I didn't do that. And the consequences of that was compromised relationships with your playing group because you're not spending the time with them that you should. And so I'd have to put my hand up there and say, I've got to own that poor performance as a coach in that period.
Yeah, and that's fair enough, and that's what you need in, I guess, society these days is you're able to admit your faults, which you clearly do. But the reason obviously you coming on here is us to talk about the Perth team and stuff like that, promote the game over here. Obviously, there's been talk of a second team in New Zealand. While you were over there, did you think or see the infrastructure to be able to support a second team? I mean, I've lived over there. I lived over there for 3 years, and to be quite honest, I didn't see the infrastructure and stuff to support a second team yet. But that could be just where I was living, I guess, too. What are your thoughts on that?
One of the things I used to say over there is that we need to be that good that they got no choice but having another team in New Zealand. And I think what we're witnessing in the NRL and the elevation of players of Pacific origin coming into the game, and I really felt like that's a real key area. And I certainly can see now with the leadership in the Warriors now that's something that will definitely need to be considered. So I do believe that. And the other thing is that, quite interestingly, I believe that New Zealand, now it's 10 years since I've been there, so it may have evolved, but they're a lot more outdoor and sports focused in the time that they spend playing sport than we are.
Yeah.
In Australia. That, like I lived opposite a park and it was full all the time till 9 o'clock at night. So the talent is there. I also know that the business acumen is there as well. It's just, I'd imagined that if you were looking at doing it somewhere, you're probably targeting Wellington, I'd imagine. Is it ready to go now? And if you said, well, would you go for Perth in front of Wellington? I'd go for Perth in front of Wellington at the moment. But there's definitely the talent there, and there's definitely the potential to have a second team. I strongly believe that.
Yeah. Why? The talent is there. We have that. I guess the rugby talent. And there's kids growing up there. 98, 99% of them, when they grow up, they want to play for the All Blacks. And then it's not a dream that they can all achieve because there's only a certain amount of spots and all that sort of stuff. And that's pretty much through the whole country. So, for us as a code to be able to grab some of those kids as well, would be huge because there's so many Pacifica Islanders that live over there, that still want to represent New Zealand in the All Blacks, but are still good enough to play for rugby league and achieve whatever they can in rugby league.
I'm going to challenge you on that one, Jamie, mate, because one, we can see what the Warriors are doing now, but even when I was there, we weren't going so well. Yep. The highest, like as far as apparel goes, the highest selling jerseys in New Zealand, and Kiwis love wearing jerseys around, was Warriors jersey.
Yeah, right.
So, and particularly when you look at South Auckland, they want to be Warriors, and that's where talent comes. If you look at the Hut area in Wellington, that's a strong league area. So, and particularly, the momentum that they're developing now as an organisation, which is so cool, isn't it? Really, I think so. But I think I think there was even a shift way back then. So that shift will have definitely gained momentum, and I believe that the Warriors are going to have, they won't be second choice for a lot of young athletes. They'll be first choice, and so will a second New Zealand team.
Yeah, and that's it's funny that you mentioned that because there's been, I think, with the Warriors' success last year, hopefully they can continue it this year. That these kids will see that and they want to support and they want to get to that team. And that's one of the things I did notice when I lived over there is that I think because the Warriors weren't doing well, and a lot of people just jumped off the bandwagon when that happened. They'd be like, "Oh, the Warriors lost again," or whatever it is. So, but I think in the last couple of years, I've noticed the rugby union, the Super Rugby, has been saturated, and it's pushed a lot of people over to rugby league. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll always have a better balance, and like in Australia, rugby unions heading south and heading south quickly. It's a different rugby union in New Zealand has a very different. It's not a blue collar sport. It's a national sport. So I think that there'll always be a better balance between the two codes in New Zealand than here. But I do believe the momentum towards rugby league and the visual side of it and the fan experience will certainly degenerate more interest. So, I believe, as I said, that's my feel on it over there, and I think that there's more people invested in both in New Zealand for sure.
Yeah, I Can't wait for them to have a second team. I am hoping that Perth gets the next team, but yeah, I can't wait for them to have that second team and have that rivalry in New Zealand as well.
Oh,
Because yeah, the crowds will be insane. Wellington versus Auckland. Um, and then they can take those games. There's more games that they can take to down at Christchurch or into Hamilton or these remote parts of New Zealand as well.
yeah. I mean, they have no shortage of people showing up. That's for sure. So, it'll happen. And I think that under the current leadership in the NRL, that's already planned in. It's just obviously the timeframes around this, and that's been discussed in the past. I can remember, goodness, when I was coaching at Penrith, going to a forum about what expansion looks like. It was run by the NRL and it was a open conversation. So those conversations have been going on for a long while, but I think that they're being accelerated under the current leadership because they understand the benefits to the game. And I also support it. People will talk about the dilution of talent, and that will happen in the initial stages, but I also believe in supply and demand. And as a coach or an ex-coach, I'm also very aware of the amount of outstanding talent that didn't quite make NRL.
Yeah.
So the talent is there. Will it emerge and be not impact the quality of the competition straight away? No, that's not going to happen. We saw with one team coming in that had a very subtle impact. So that's going to be the case. But if we can look at it over a 5 to 10 year plan, there'll be the talent and the competition will go through the roof, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I think, that's the biggest argument that people have is that it's going to dilute talent. And like you said, we do have the talent there. Our reserve grades that we got, like the QRL and the Q Cup and the New South Wales Cup, like there's a lot of talent there. And it might not be to the NRL quality just yet, but it doesn't take much for it to get there. With the right coaching, the right development, and all that sort of stuff, these players will get there. It's just, it's a matter of how long.
Yes, it's not even the coaches. It's just the best way to get someone up to NRL talent or to that ability, so they can, be a player that can contribute at that level. They need to play NRL.
Yeah.
And if they get the opportunity to play NRL, they'll develop far more than they will when they're playing New South Wales Cup. So that, as I say, it'll take a 5 to 5 year plus time frame for that dilution not to be even noticeable. But you can't say the Dolphins coming in massively impacted the quality of games in the NRL. I don't think that was the case. But you can see some teams, the depth isn't at every club at the moment. So as soon as some teams were getting injuries, their performance were heavily compromised because the backup players weren't of the same quality. But that'll be mitigated over if all we had was remain the same as where we are now. You won't notice that in 3 years' time.
Yeah. Where obviously the NRL is talking about a PNG team at the moment as the next team. Do you think that's a viable option to go to PNG? Excuse me, and base them out of Cairns? I'm of the belief, and it's not just because I'm wanting a Perth team, but I'm of the belief that the players won't want to go there. Security risks, all that sort of stuff. Yes, when they go there, they're treated like they're royalty because they're some huge celebrities because of how much they love the game up there. But the security problems, the corruption, and all that sort of stuff that go on up in the PNG, isn't the best. And then you got a team based out of Cairns for another country. It's sort of, to me, doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. I've spent a fair bit of time in PNG. I called games in the 2017 World Cup up there, and have a little bit of an association with the Hunters. I think it's a national sport up there, and there's a lot of untapped talent there because they obviously don't get the quality of coaching that we do in New Zealand and Australia. And so resourcing that in a way that develops that talent will certainly, I think it's definitely got merit, and I like the model. I'll be honest with you, Jamie. I like the model of them basically living in Cairns and playing in Port Moresby. It's and obviously there are some security risks associated to it. You can't ignore that. But I can only talk about my experience up there and being around teams that were up there during the World Cup in a country that is where it's rugby league is a national sport. And to say that they're passionate about it is an understatement. So I think there's real merit in it. And again, I'm talking about the longer span of the expansion of the game. And I do think that it also will open up a pathway to more talent coming into the NRL. We do have some players of PNG background playing in the NRL, but when you look at their pathways and what opportunity they get to play footy as young people, you kind of understand why there's not more. Because even though they play footy, it's not official, it's unstructured, it's not on great facilities. So if you can put 3 years into their pathway system, you would immediately see a huge difference in the quality of player that they produce.
Well, that was going to be my next question, and I guess point to you is, obviously the NRL is looking at it from a money standpoint, with the Australian government backing it, all that sort of stuff, and obviously the Australian government's got their own agenda to why they want that team there. The thing for me is, do they need to spend more time and more money developing the grassroots of the game there, getting those quality players to come out? Because we don't want a team coming out of there that don't have that quality just yet.
You certainly have to have other NRL players, from different cultural backgrounds playing. They're all, being based in Cairns with that team. And you're right. I think it's probably, again, if I focus on 15 to 20-year-olds, you're looking at a 5-year time frame to really have the team predominantly players of PNG background. I don't think that's a lot. Could be a birth certificate thing, but I don't think that's a long time. And I think it's a really worthwhile investment for the game. And then I think it's also a really worthwhile investment for the region. I like the idea of South Pacific teams as well. I don't know the time frames around that, but I think that there's real benefit in exploring that. That's for sure. The fact that there's a lot of affluence in PNG. There's a lot of poverty as well. So there's a very split, but the resources to put in like high quality facilities and high quality support exist in PNG.
Yeah, cool. I guess that's what they need, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's there.
Yeah. You would have heard as well. North Sydney's trying to get back into the NRL. I think 99% of us believe that that's not going to happen without them joining another team. I think it's just the true diehard North Sydney Bears supporters that believe that they're going to get back in, which New South Wales Sydney having too many teams as it is, I can't see that happening. But what are your thoughts? I guess of growing up and being around the Bears, playing against the Bears, them being a traditionalist side, joining with someone like Perth or the second New Zealand team or a Pacifica team.
My short answer is I don't think it's a good idea. So, like, I remember one of the models they put forward where they were still going to play. It was going to be a Perth-based team, but they were going to play some games at North Sydney Oval.
Yeah.
Now, I had the opportunity to call the doubleheader in Perth last year. I think every game, if we're going to get a team in Perth, and I believe that needs to happen, I believe play all the games in Perth.
Yeah.
And if you can explain to me how it makes sense not to do that, I'm happy to listen. But yeah, I don't see any merit in that. I don't see any merit in having another team in Sydney. I understand where North Sydney's coming from about wanting to have the Bears as a using that brand in the future. I don't know how that works in the NRL.
Yeah.
Now, I know some people would argue the point against me on that one. I might be limited in my understanding of how they're trying to do that, but again, I use the example of Perth. If you're going to have a team in Perth, they play all their home games in Perth.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, I read something the other day. Someone was arguing that point. Out of was it 11 games that some teams get out of a year to be at home. Then you dilute it by taking 3 or 4 games over to North Sydney Oval. So therefore, it goes down to 7 or 8 games. And that dilutes the population of the sport over here. Yes, we keep that Sydney base in that sense going, but the Perth people miss out on 3 or 4 games, and that sort of is what I guess detracts people from going to the games because they're like, well, we're not getting the games that we're supposed to have. I've talked to a few of the ex Western Reds players, and they've told me why what happened with why they sort of went out of business. I think the NRL needs to make sure that doesn't happen again. But I just can't see North Sydney coming back in any facet at the moment. I think maybe their demands are too high. Maybe the Pacifica team might be the best choice for them.
Yeah, again, sometimes we need to let go of the past. And I get that people want to maintain that identity. I wouldn't marry it to a Pacifica team either.
Yeah.
Personally, I'm not saying I'm right. That's just an opinion.
Yeah.
My opinion is that I don't see how that works, operationally or even as a brand. Even from a performance side, if you're a Perth-based team, you're coming over here an extra 3 times, to play home games. That's going to have a performance impact as well. Yeah. So that's going to, compromise the ability of the Perth team of taking advantage of home ground.
Yeah, absolutely. What are your opinions on Perth, or I guess who should be the next team? Should it be Perth or PNG or second New Zealand team?
Well, I'm saying this without the knowledge of what the business cases are.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think that in modern life, in modern sport, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go and have a look at how the Melbourne team's going in rugby union. All right. So you got to make sure that it's a really resilient, strong business model that sits behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it was my choice, definitely there's only 2 choices, either Perth or PNG.
Yeah.
The business model would definitely need to be explored. We know one business model is being supported by the Australian government. I think bringing 2 teams in at the one time is not what's needed. It's got to be a progressive thing. So I believe both teams need to come in eventually. If you said, well, come on, Matt, make a decision who needs to come in first, I would say that the Perth team would be the first team. And I'm doing that on a logistical side of things.
Yeah.
not on a business model or my understanding of how that would impact TV ratings. What other business impacts that would be also relevant. But I just feel like the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Obviously, they've got their own local comp, but the ability to build that local competition, and also understanding that there's a lot of obviously New Zealand-based people or of New Zealand origin, and a lot of league-based people that are over there, for work requirements. So I get that there's a pre-existing competition, local competition, a pre-existing fan base there as well. So I would go with Perth initially, but if I sat down and someone gave me the business model and said, "Mate, look, I hear where you're coming from, but look how powerful this other one is."
Yeah.
You can't ignore that.
Yeah.
If you ignore that, and all you're doing it is on around, the perceptions that I just shared, sustainability becomes a real issue. And if we lose a Perth team for the second time, that's it.
Yeah.
So we've got to make sure all those foundations, everything is there, so that when it's a forever thing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Not what we experienced during Super League.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And I think the state government over here has said that they're going to back the Perth team. They've obviously put in so much money and stuff to get the state of origins over here. As you mentioned, the double header last year, which I was at myself. I was there to watch the games. And there's so many of those mining companies over here too that have already said that they'll back the Perth team. So I think financially it will be right. It's the right people running the show is what needs to happen. But yeah, I think outside of New South Wales and Queensland the last couple of years, WA has had the biggest junior base. That goes against Melbourne as well, who have had success for the last how many decades now? The last 20 odd years. So, for Perth to have that is huge, going towards the future of the game over here for us. So, yeah, me personally, I'd like to see Perth come in. I'm a Brisbane Broncos supporter, and I will be till the day I die. There's no two ways about that. But for me to have a Perth team is I can take my kids to go watch the games in the sport that I love, and that's what it is. For me, it's about the sport that I love, and promoting the young kids. I guess another avenue for young kids in the neighborhoods and stuff to pursue another sport that they can look up to these first grade players and try achieve what they can, and get these kids off the street and not being idiots like they are, I guess. And that's just how I see my goals for a Perth team.
Yeah, and again, there's a lot of community-based sports that are attached to rugby league. There's touch footy, there's Oz tag, there's league tag, which are like massive competitions now, particularly on the over here in the east. So yeah, there are a lot of benefits that can be extracted, not just by having an NRL team, but by the other competitions that are really inclusive. There's no one that can't play those sports, So there's a whole lot of benefits, and look, I believe that there's going to be a Perth team at some stage.
Yeah.
I can't see that not happening. Obviously, without being too repetitive, it's just making sure that the Perth team that is going to be introduced sustainable model, with a brand that engages local people and can get some real momentum.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I just want to know, mate, what are you up to these days? I was reading up that you were an assistant under Anthony Griffin at the Dragons. Are you still in some capacity at the Dragons at the moment, or you off
Yep.
doing something else?
No, I don't. I've got my own business. I have a wellbeing business called the Change Room, and we work, in workers' compensation and large government organisations doing prevention stuff. But I also do a couple of days a week at the Dragons.
Yeah, cool.
So yeah, it's and the organisation's getting some momentum, which is good to see.
Yeah, yeah, and it helps with the new head coach coming in, Shane Flanagan. He's got a fair credentials behind him. He's hopefully can turn that club around. And, yeah, that'll be good. I've talked to a few people, and they seem to be on the belief that it's not the coaching and the players, it's the head offices, between St George and Illawarra that are clashing, and it's filtering down. But I don't know that. I just from reports.
Yeah, look again. I think that there's been some challenges in those areas, not so much internal, but the external impacts of it can't be ignored.
Yeah,
And I really feel like that's becoming less of an issue.
yeah,
But there's also we're coming together as a whole club as far as even staff wise, because we've had a geographical
yeah,
divide in staff because some are located in Sydney and some are in Wollongong, but that's all coming together in the near future. So there's a lot to be optimistic about. It's again, it's a little bit like what I was saying. The fix isn't going to come in a year.
yeah,
The fix for the Dragons is probably a little longer term than that, but
yeah,
it's coming.
yeah, absolutely. So with your company, mate, what was the company name again? Sorry,
It's called the Change Room.
the
Yeah,
Change Room.
and I use a lot of basically what it does is give access to normal. There's a thing called high performance that's the industry that we call rugby league. Well,
Yeah,
it's a trick word, Jamie. If it's human performance. So if something works for a player in their lifestyle, it's probably going to work for you.
yeah,
So I have a few ex rugby league players and doctors, and so Anthony Minicello works in the business. Jeff Hardy works in the business. You know, Mark Hughes works in the business. So
yeah,
we have people that have lived experience of challenge that share things, but we also have, an amazing lady called Dr. Ali Walker, and she talks about human connection, and we have another author called Susan Pierce and some other people that are really help make people understand how they can live their life in a better way. But we do it in a way that's not rocket science. We make it accessible to everyone.
yeah,
We run some leadership programs and things like that as well. So it's been a really, really fun journey to be a part of that as well.
yeah. Cool. How do people get in touch with your company, mate?
If they just go to the changeroom.info,
Yeah,
so changeroom.info, and that's we can be found there. And any questions, be assured we'll get back to you straight away. And we have done some stuff in Western Australia too, by the way.
yeah,
And we've done a lot of stuff online for remote workers as
yeah,
well. So I know that I think it was Essential Energy, that we did a lot of stuff for Western Australian based employees over there as well. So
yeah,
they were all fun. They took the mick out of me a fair bit, but it was a good thing to be involved with. So yeah, it's, as I say, it's been a really rewarding process, and it's good to see players who have had experience in the NRL be able to use that experience to help people recover from injury or avoid injury.
yeah.
Our results have been, you know, pretty outstanding, to be honest with you. So, yeah,
That's cool.
I say this a lot, mate. If there's a stereotype of rugby league players being dribblers, right? But someone like Anthony Minicello, who actually the year you shared with everyone about I spent at the Roosters. Well, Anthony was there, and he basically, I'm not going to say saved my life, but changed my life. I had an autoimmune disease. I was injecting myself twice a day with a anti-inflammatory steroid. I don't have it anymore. There's many who missed 3 years of football through a spinal injury, changed his diet. He introduced me to that diet, and I was able to get rid of, that disease. So that I wasn't meant to be able to do.
That's awesome. That's so cool to hear.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah.
Well, I've seen him do it with thousands of people now coming through our program. So it's not just confined to me.
Yeah, that's so cool to hear, mate. That's so cool that he's been able to help so many other people as well. Yeah.
Well, I can tell you that about Mark Hughes and all the other people as well that are in the business. It's pretty. You sit back and see how they impact people.
Yeah.
Because people lean in, right? You're going to lean into someone, but once you lean in, you've got to actually give them information that's helpful.
Yeah.
And we've been able to do that for, I guess I say, for thousands of people, get them back to work, get them back to functional life. And, we've changed businesses from the inside, where they're not having the psychological injuries that they used to have and things like that. So it's nice to be involved with people like that.
That's so cool, mate. Mate, that's all I've got for you today. I really appreciate you jumping on and giving me your time. If you're ever back over in Perth, mate, please don't hesitate to contact me. We'll go out for a cup of coffee or something and have a chat and get to know each other a bit more. But I really appreciate you jumping on and giving me your time today, mate.
Well, if the ABC send me over there, mate, for another game, I'll definitely get in touch.
Well, the Dolphins are playing the Roosters over here this year, so
I need to look at my schedule.
No, I really appreciate it, mate. Matthew Elliott, thank you for joining me on NRL Fans WA.
You're welcome, Jamie. Have a great day, mate.
Thank you, mate. You too. See you, mate.